Protesters have been calling for more jobs and better political representation. Meanwhile, workers have been staging a sit-in at the main oil field in Haima to demand more investment from the state. Hundreds of people rallied on Saturday in the Algerian capital. Police were on standby as the crowd moved towards Martyrs Square in Algiers. Opposition parties say Abdulaziz Bouteflika's government has squandered the country's wealth. The government recently lifted a 19-year-old state of emergency. And protests continue to grip the island kingdom of Bahrain into the early hours on Sunday. Demonstrators, mainly from the Shiite Muslim majority, remain camped out at Pearl Roundabout in the capital, Manama. That location is the epicenter of the movement calling for democratic reform. There have been daily protests in the country for the past 2 weeks. The United Nations plans to send another 2,000 peacekeepers and 2 helicopters to Côte d'Ivoire because of escalating violence in the country. And this comes as the head of the African Union, Jean Ping, met the internationally recognized leader of the country, Alassane Ouattara, on Saturday. Ouattara, who has been placed under UN protection since disputed election results last year, says he will attend a meeting of AU leaders in Ethiopia next week. In Somalia, African Union peacekeepers and government troops are claiming some success against al-Shabaab fighters. The joint forces say they've captured key positions in the north of the capital, Mogadishu. Commanders say they're also now in control of Beled Hawa on the Kenyan border. Dozens of fighters are reported to have been killed in hours of gun battles. But the African Union is also paying a heavy price. It's thought that more than 50 peacekeepers have been killed in the past 2 weeks. Ireland's 2 largest parties have agreed to form a coalition government. The centre-right Fine Gael won last week's election and says it will form a government with the centre-left Labour. The Fianna Fáil government was defeated over its handling of Ireland's economic collapse. Prime Minister-in-waiting Edna Kenny says the new coalition wants to negotiate the terms of an $85 billion euro bailout.
First of all, may I say,
Italy's Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi says he'll defend himself in a court as long as he doesn't have to show up more than once a week. Berlusconi is accused of fraud and embezzlement over the acquisition of television rights for his Mediaset empire. He faces a separate trial in April on charges that he paid for sex with an underage nightclub dancer. Berlusconi denies all accusations. U.S. President Barack Obama has appealed for political opponents to meet halfway on the country's proposed budget. He made the remark during his weekly radio and internet address.
We need to come together, Democrats and Republicans, around a long-term budget that sacrifices wasteful spending without sacrificing the job-creating investments in our future. My administration's already put forward specific cuts that meet congressional Republicans halfway, and I'm prepared to do more. But we'll only finish the job together by sitting at the same table, working out our differences, and finding common ground.
In Western Canada, the proposed logging of an ancient forest with a blockbuster name has sparked a campaign to protect the area. The provincial government of British Columbia is distancing itself from plans to chop Avatar Grove, but environmental groups say that is not enough. Imtiaz Tayyab has more.
This is Avatar Grove, a range of red cedars and Douglas firs that have been standing here for between 500 and 1,000 years. The environmental campaigner Ken Wu discovered the site while exploring for ancient trees over a year ago, giving it its now widely used name, inspired by the Hollywood blockbuster when he found it was earmarked for logging. Wu says the plight of the fictitious planet isn't too dissimilar to what's happening here.
Avatar, in large part, is about saving old-growth forests on an alien planet. And we realize that we have an incredible rainforest here on Earth that needs protecting.
The province of British Columbia is one of the few places in the world that has such massive and ancient forests. Its government is also one of the few that allows for the commercial logging of such trees. Environmentalists say if policy isn't changed, this is what's left. Nearly 5 million hectares of BC's forests over 140 years old are protected by the province. But with over 95 million hectares of forest land in total, environmental groups say that isn't enough. The plight of Avatar Grove has attracted tens of thousands. And after the province of BC's own independent forestry oversight body urged officials to spare the range of ancient trees, the government appears to be listening.
I do think that the public's calling out for better mechanisms to manage our forests. We've continued to do that, and I think as a government we've got lots of examples. Is there more work to do? There's always going to be more work to do.
The logging company with rights to cut Avatar Grove are now indicating they won't. Environmental groups say public pressure is to thank, but add millions of other hectares of ancient growth forests in BC also need saving. Imtiaz Tayyab, Al Jazeera, Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
Right, before we go, let's get to the latest on our top story from Libya. We've got these latest pictures coming just in of Tripoli, where heavy gunfire can be heard. Let's listen in. Our correspondents say government sources say that these are the sounds of celebration, but there have been conflicting reports of where that gunfire is coming from and the situation in Tripoli and the surrounding areas. We'll, of course, have more after this.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
What Gaddafi has done, he dismantled or destroyed the system in the country.
As chaos and violence sweep across Libya.
They're living through fear, they're living through a nightmare.
They're using ammunition, live ammunition.
Al Jazeera hears from those who have lived in fear of Gaddafi's regime.
We don't want him to leave. We want to arrest him. 42 years is too much.
Libya, a state of terror. At this time on Al Jazeera.
It was a revolution which ended half a century of autocratic rule and inspired a wave of public protest that swept across the Arab world.
Internet, Facebook, Twitter, they were not the revolution.
In an exclusive two-part documentary, Raghi Omar traces the roots and repercussions of this uprising and examines why 23 years of dictatorship fell in only 28 days. The death of fear, at this time on Al Jazeera.
You don't fight threats, you fight enemies.
Our core function remains the territorial defense of our populations and our member states.
Sanctions, do you think they will work?
A huge number of Western forces have not made huge progress.
The public no longer even believes that, we are there because we are building democracy.
Our empire is imploding. It itself is an illusion.
Empire with Marwan Bashar on Al Jazeera.